technical support, we're going to have telephone support, generally for novice and home users. More effective if you have a problem. If you have a problem computer in front of you when you call, so you can work on it right then interactively. Usually provided free for a limited time only. Nobody provides this anymore today. And then online websites, online forums, and troubleshooting wizards. That's where everybody puts their information. They just put it out there and you're pretty much on your own to figure it out. Working safely, you want to avoid back injuries. Some of these old cases were very heavy, but with today's 800 watt power supplies, they're pretty heavy as well. So you want to squat, bend your knees, not at the waist. Don't bend your waist, except for when you're squatting, but you want to bend your knees, not your waist. You want to make sure that you don't trip over wires. This is very, very common. Avoid cuts on the thin metal with sharp edges. Avoid cuts when handling breakable glass components. So this used to be a real problem on the cases. They had razor sharp edges and they were made in China, and man, I don't know why, but they used to hurt when they would cut you. They were just jagged, nasty cuts and they would get infected. It was real bad. The cases used to be real bad. But today they're pretty nice. They have rounded edges and everything, so it's kind of difficult, I would say, to cut yourself on a case today. Unlike it used to be, you could pick it up. You know, if you pulled the side off and you just grabbed it from the top, you would cut your hand. Anytime you touch that case, you would cut your hand. So I always carried a pair of gloves around with me for that. And now they had straps that you could strap the computer with and pick it up with a little strap, like a suitcase thing around it. So, but it's not too bad today. So, but anyway, for the test, remember this: back injuries, tripping over wires, and cutting yourself on metal. Power and safety. Power is the primary safety hazard in servicing computers. EST, electrostatic discharge, can destroy sensitive equipment. Again, not so much of a problem today, although it might cause you to reboot it and unplug it for a few minutes while the static electricity dissipates if you do charge a chip. But they're pretty hardened against it today. It can still damage a computer, but it's not as likely as it used to be. Used to be, if you heard the crack from your finger, it was done. The circuit board would be done. A properly grounded computer prevents transmission of electromagnetic interference. So if it's interfering with a cell phone or a 2.4 gigahertz phone, you know, the old house phones that some people still have today that use VoIP, that kind of thing, if it's not properly grounded, so you need it, that's what the multimeter's for. You want to check that wall socket and make sure that it's wired correctly. So the little short side of the outlet should be the longer tip. So if you have the little smiley face, it looks like 3 holes in the wall, right? So you have one of them's taller than the other. The tall one is the neutral, the short one is the black, so it should be hot, and then the round one is a ground, and you want to make sure that they're all properly grounded. A lot of times they're miswired in a house, and that can cause some problems. High voltage often exists in power supplies and monitors. So yes, the older monitors, right? The big CRT monitors. We don't open those and work on them. We don't open power supplies and work on them. We just change them out. Guidelines for working with computer equipment. Avoid wearing jewelry because it conducts electricity and you can drop it. And do not use liquids around electrical equipment. That seems like an obvious one, right? Just remember that. Don't use 3-prong to 2-prong power plug adapters because you're knocking out the ground. The computer won't be properly grounded. That's important. And also if the computer's not grounded and you touch it, you're not doing anything. You can still charge the chips, right? So you can still have an electrostatic discharge. Replace worn or damaged power cords immediately. Absolutely, if they're chafed. Do not rest anything on a power cord. You don't want any kind of friction on there or crushing action at all. Avoid using extension cords. Yeah. Especially with today's computers because they need to have heavy wires in them if you're extending them. The longer you extend it, the heavier the wires get, right? So you're going to need some pretty thick extension cords with heavy electrical conductors because these computers today will consume 800 watts is probably an average power consumption. Avoid using extension cords. Keep electrical covers intact. Don't take the cover off and then start putting your fingers around that. Keep air vents clear. Very important. The computer has to breathe. Do not remove covers from high voltage items unless absolutely necessary. You should not be doing that unless you're properly trained, period. So just remember this for the test. Fire. If a fire is not extinguished within 30 seconds, exit the building and call for help. So this can happen in computers when you're dusting a computer. You might bring it back and put it in service, and then a few minutes later, you might have a fire. You're going to have an arc running across that thing, and it's just a matter of time before the heat turns into a fire. So I've actually had this happen on a computer I cleaned. They had one dust bunny that got in there where I couldn't see it, and it started a fire in the computer. So be very careful about fire and cleaning the computers. This happened because the particular customer, I always asked him to let me clean the computers. He didn't want me to, and it didn't take that long. It's not that expensive, but anyway, he didn't want me to do it. So it was really dusty in there. I mean, like, it was layers of dust. I had to peel the first layer of dust off is how bad it was. So we had some really nasty dust bunnies on there. And the dust was so cooked on there from the heat, and it was heating up the computer so much. Again, heat is a problem with computers. Heat causes fires, you know, all this kind of stuff, right? So I literally peeled the first blanket of dust off and then went back and started blowing it out, left it outside for a few minutes, let all the dust bunnies settle to the ground, blew it again, and then I brought it back inside. Well, I don't know if one of the dust bunnies kind of went back in the computer or what, but one of them got in there. It was a big one, probably about that big around, not very dense, just enough to cause a problem. And sure enough, he called me back and said the computer was smoking 30 minutes later and they threw it outside. So don't take that lightly. If you walk into a very dusty environment, be aware that you could have a fire. Make sure you have fire extinguishers around. So this is a serious thing. You know, you don't want to cause a fire in someone's office, right? Because you're liable. And for all those workers, it's a big problem. It can cost a lot of money. Know the emergency procedures at your workplace. Know the nearest fire exits and location of the fire extinguishers. Know how to use the right fire extinguishers for each type of fire. We have A, B, C, and D, right? And then avoid overloading electrical outlets.